Hello everybody and welcome again to Science Live. We're coming to you from the Creation Museum Creation Education Lab again. Today I'm joined by Dr. Jennifer Rivera. She is going to be helping us understand more about fingerprinting. We'll also be doing another program next week about fingerprinting. So a couple of those coming up. And we have a special guest who will be joining us in a few minutes that you will be very interested in. So make sure you stay tuned for that. And we're thankful to be bringing you these programs where we can talk to you more about God's wonderful creation, how the triune God of the Bible has created this amazing universe for us to live in and explore. And we can share some of those things with you, bring in experts who understand these things, who've studied God's world and the laws that He's created, and help you appreciate Him and glorify Him more. So, Dr. Rivera, what is your background and why are you qualified to help us understand fingerprints?
Well, I do have a background in fingerprint science. Used to work in a crime scene unit where my specialty was dactyloscopy, which is the study of fingerprints.
Dactyloscopy.
Yes.
Try and spell that one, kids.
That's a hard word to say. But friction-ridged skin is distinctly different from other skin on our body. And so that is how we can get fingerprints, because a fingerprint is basically just a copy of the friction-ridged skin pattern. So to understand the difference between friction-ridged skin and most of the skin on your body, we can do like a little test. So if you can take your hand real quick, and kids, you can do this at home, and just rub the underside of your arm right here. And you're going to see that your skin is going to feel very soft and smooth. It is distinctly different from your friction-ridged skin. Now I want to take your hands and rub them together, right? And you're going to see that it feels different. You can almost feel those raised ridges rubbing against each other.
It's like little vibrations rubbing.
Right. It's almost like sandpaper rubbing against each other. And that's where that term friction comes from. Scientists use that term because it does give us a non-slip type surface. So just to kind of give you an idea of what our friction-ridged skin looks like, it's similar to what we see here in bubble wrap, right? It's going to roll like mountains and valleys. We're going to have these mountain peaks, and then these dips or furrows that we call in between. So because we have these mountain peaks, we can apply ink to that, and we can take a copy of your friction-ridged skin.
Sure, so the ink would stay on the top
on
of
the
the
top
ridges
of it, right?
And not get down in the valleys.
Exactly.
Unless you smash it in there too hard.
Which you don't want to do. You never want to get ink into the furrows or the dips, because then you end up with a smudge and not a fingerprint. So that's the distinct difference. All right. So we are going to check out Mr. Patterson's fingerprints today. All right. And so kids, you can do this at home. It's a lot of fun. All you need is a balloon. Now a lighter color balloon is best because we want your black ink to show up on that. All right. So go ahead and take that white balloon and go ahead and turn it so that it almost makes like a little bowl here. All right, you're just going to lay that on the table. Now we're going to use real fingerprint ink, and you can actually buy this online. All right, this works best. Now there are a couple other things you could use. You could use like a nice thick black paint, so someone may have that at home, and you can just take a paintbrush and then just kind of brush it over the top of your finger.
You don't want it to run down there, just a light brush over the surface.
If you have a really wet, moist stamp pad, that's not going to work the same, because then you're going to get moisture into the dips, and then you're going to get a smudge. Right, it's not going to work. Of course, if you use paint for the balloon activity, you need to allow time for that to dry a little bit. So, but with our fingerprint ink, we don't need to. So go ahead and take that, and you kind of want to roll your thumb in there, because our friction skin actually is all the way from nail to nail, we call it. So we do a nail to nail roll when we talk about fingerprints.
So I rolled it across
all
like
the way,
this.
nail to nail. And let's make sure you got ink all the way down to that crease. Because your fingerprint pattern actually goes all the way from the tip of your finger to that very first crease where you can bend your finger. Okay? So now go ahead and into that little bowl as flat as possible. You want to avoid any wrinkles. You might want to move it close, put it on the edge of the table. That makes it a little easier. That way you can get your fist out. Now I'm going to roll my finger too, and I'm going to do it with Mr. Patterson. We're going to roll it into the balloon. Okay? And it should look similar to this. Okay? How did you do, Mr. Patterson?
Looks pretty good.
It looks pretty good?
Distinct lines there.
All right, so now we need to determine, well, what finger type or fingerprint pattern do you have? All right, so to do that, we are going to blow up our balloons. All right, so I believe you brought a special pump for that today.
Pump?
Yes, we want to make sure that we don't
try and stay safe and
not
mixing all that air.
Exactly. Because there are basically 3 types of fingerprint patterns, all right? And you can see these up here on this chart. We have loops, we have arches, and we have whorls. In humans, the most common type of fingerprint pattern we see is a loop pattern, right? And there are two types of loops. Those are radial and ulnar, and those are based on human anatomy. The second most common type of pattern in humans is whorls, all right? And there are 4 different types of whorls. And then arches are the rarest. So people usually get really excited when they find out that they have an arch pattern, because only about 5% of all fingerprint patterns are some type of arch. Now, let's see how Mr. Patterson does. I can clearly see what pattern type you have.
Yes.
All right? So this helps blow it up for you. If you don't have a magnifier at home or magnifying glass, using a balloon is a great way to see your details up close. So, Mr. Patterson, do you think you can match it? Is it a loop? Is it an arch? Or is it a whorl? What do you think?
I think I can see a clear arch right there in the middle. Is that?
It is actually a loop. Yes, it has
Oh,
this.
good.
Yeah, it
There's-
goes. Yeah,
alright,
it
there's
goes
the
like
other side. I
this.
wasn't
Yes.
seeing the other part. I was
So
looking too
it is
close.
definitely a loop pattern, and a loop looks a lot like a slide. Imagine you're climbing up and sliding down. That's exactly what you can see in Mr. Patterson's. Now let's see what mine looks like.
Get this tied off real
This
quick.
is my thumbprint as well.
I dropped the balloon, so I had to pick it up.
Now, what's important to realize, though, is that all 10 of your fingers are different.
Yes.
So you would really need to do this for all 10 of your fingers. Okay, so here is my thumbprint, and it is distinctly a loop, all right? Remember, loops are the most common. So I actually, 8 of my 10 fingers are a loop pattern, all right? So that is the most common. Now, here's what's important to remember as well. All 10 of your fingers are different. Those 10 fingerprints are different from your 10 toe prints. So every single person has 20 unique fingerprint patterns, unlike anyone who's lived in the past, living in the present, or going to be born in the future. You know, and the Bible says in Psalms 139:14, I will praise you for I'm fearfully and wonderfully made, and your fingerprints are just one example, one gift that God has given you that makes you unique and unlike anyone else that has ever lived.
Yeah, just a reminder of the care and detail that God puts into all of his creation, especially humans, thinking about us being specially made in the image of God, like we read in Genesis 1.
Exactly. So here's what's really neat, though. God just didn't give humans fingerprints, right? He gave animals fingerprints too. And a lot of people don't realize that, all right? So we're going to look at a few examples that I have, and then we're going to meet one of our special guests today. All right, so we're going to start with primates, all right? Now, primates, all right, do have friction-rich skin. They do have the 3 types of fingerprint patterns, all right? Now, evolutionists like to say that the reason primates have fingerprint patterns and friction-rich skin is because, we are descended from a common ancestor, as human and primates are. And so it's just one of the examples, they say, that we have descended. But it's important to realize that primate fingerprints are distinctly different than ours. And there are many published and researched traits that are different. One of the main ones, as you can actually see right here in the photographs, is that primate ridges are much thinner than ours. They're not as wide. So because of that, they just have more of them. And you can see that in the chimpanzee versus the human fingerprint that we see here. All right. Now, some people say, well, we would expect differences because, it's been 7 million years since we diverged from our common ancestor, and that's why we see these differences. But, we have God's word, and Genesis 1 is very clear that we are made in the image of God, and primates are created after their kind. So we can trust God's word. It's perfect and true, and we know that our fingerprints are distinct and special. And what's really neat is God could have just given us all friction skin, to have that non-slip surface, but he said, I love you so much, and I love my creation, I'm going to give animals unique fingerprints too. All right? So primates do have fingerprints.
Now, some of you listening at home may be able to hear some clicking going on in the background. That's a hint at what our special guest is going to be in just a few minutes.
Yes.
See if you can figure that out. We could take some guesses in the comments.
All right, so here's just another example where we can see primates. This is actually a gorilla here, all right? Fingerprint patterns that we see here. Now, another animal that does have fingerprint patterns is marsupials, all right? Now, a lot of people don't realize that koalas do have fingerprints, all right? And they are what we call arboreal, so they do live in trees, all right? So it would make sense that they would have a friction surface.
Because they'll be climbing and gripping, and that
they're
friction
climbing
ridge
trees,
would help them grip
they're
the bark of
grabbing
the trees.
onto things and holding things, right?
Primarily.
So that friction skin serves a distinct purpose for them. Now here's what's really interesting though. When we look at koala prints and human fingerprints, they're almost exactly the same.
So,
yes.
if we were in Australia training
Yes.
to be fingerprint analysts, we'd have to be able to distinguish those things.
Yes, and it's actually, there's a few articles that say if a fingerprint from a koala was left behind at a crime scene, you wouldn't be able to tell the difference, because even under the microscope, they're almost exactly the same. Our
That's
structure
fascinating,
is almost the same. Well, this is a serious problem for evolutionists, all right? First of all, koalas and humans are not on the same branch of the evolutionary tree,
yeah.
right?
I mean, that divergence would have been many millions of years
Many,
ago, not
many.
even close to.
Exactly, and yet koalas are almost exactly like humans.
Yeah,
right?
so they would call that a convergent evolution, and they try to explain that, but there's
Right.
really no reasonable way to.
There really isn't. They say they hope they can find a reason in the future why we have comparable fingerprints, but
Yeah.
we know God loves us and He gave us features we need to survive in our environment. And koalas are different. I mean, they don't have friction-rich skin covering the entire surface of their hands like we do, just mainly the tips of their digits. So it is distinct differences from humans. And the most common print pattern we see in koala is an arch, which is our rarest, right? So it's kind of another distinct difference. So koalas are marsupials, and as I said, yes, you can see their structure here is almost identical to humans, and so we cannot really tell the difference between humans and koala friction-rich skin. But koalas are not the only marsupial that has friction-rich skin. We also see this in land-dwelling marsupials. Now, the difference is in land-dwelling marsupials is they don't necessarily have friction-rich skin, as they have textured skin, all right?
Okay.
So if we take a look here at Emerald, now Emerald was our baby kangaroo when we fingerprinted her. I kind of blew this up for you. Her hand is much smaller than that. We can see that she has a very distinct pattern to her skin, but it is not what we can call a unique friction-rich fingerprint pattern.
Okay.
So
We're not going to get the distinct whorls and
Right,
loops and arches
right.
that we do.
don't have those details that
Okay.
make us unique. Definitely textured, all right, but not a friction-rich skin. And we also see this in Emerald's mother, all right, Nama, all right, who is another land-dwelling marsupial. So this is where we find a distinct difference between tree-dwelling marsupials and land-dwelling marsupials, is we see a difference in friction-rich skin. So in our tree-dwelling or arboreal marsupials, we do have these unique fingerprint patterns, but in our land-dwelling, we do not see that,
Okay.
all right? Which kind of makes sense. They're not climbing, right? So they may not need that non-slip surface that our tree-dwelling marsupials do. Now here's what's really cute, is sugar gliders, right, also do have friction-rich skin because they're tree dwellers, right? So we can see here, now this is the best print we've gotten so far from
Okay.
Gabriel, our sugar glider. You
All
can
right.
imagine his hand is extremely small.
Very hard to get those
This is
details to
very
show up.
much blown up for you, but we can see here distinct friction-rich skin, and they do have unique fingerprint patterns as well, all right? So it's pretty neat how we see this distinct difference. Now, we do have a special guest here today.
All right, this is going to be the exciting
Yes,
part.
because we are going to take a print pattern from one of our wallabies today.
All
All
right.
right, so we do have Boomer here with us today so that we can show you, yes, he does have a textured surface, but he does not have friction-rich skin. So this is Leann Sarkisian, and she is our zoo manager, and she is going to help us today. Here we go.
Oh,
Oh,
if
Boomer.
Boomer cooperates.
So this is what we call animal enrichment, right, Leann?
Yes, this is some training and also animal enrichment. So we use training here. We use positive reinforcement training here at the Creation Museum as we're training our animals. So they basically have a choice whether or not they want to participate. Boomer here has been really awesome in learning how to basically give us his paws and also put his paws down to get fingerprints. So we'll see if he'll come over here. Boomer. Boomer. I may have to grab some peanut butter. Peanut butter is his favorite.
Now we are using the same fingerprint ink that we would use if we were taking human fingerprints. It is a non-toxic, safe fingerprint ink that we can use on animals as well.
Oh, the lid's on it. Doesn't help. Good boy, come here. Come here, Boomer.
Now, if he's like your dogs, that sound might just elicit that response to come and check
Yes,
things out.
normally when there's peanuts or peanut butter, which I've got both in here today, he's usually game to come and participate. So what I've done with teaching Boomer how to give me his fingerprints, is I taught him how to give me his paws. So basically we just roll a little bit of ink on paw. No? Here you go. We'll give him some, maybe. Ooh. You want some? You're not sure. Then we're going to get him. Paw.
Working with animals is always tricky, right?
Come on. Oh, and we're going to get a paw print on the floor.
Oh, yeah, we actually got a nice little partial
got
there.
a nice little partial.
Partial
That was
right here
actually
on the
really
floor of the lab.
That might be
You
the
can see it
best
right here.
one.
So working with animals is always challenging.
Yes, it is.
He's also a little bit out of his element in here. He's exploring everywhere.
Yes.
He loves being inside. He loves visiting the Creation Museum. So when he comes inside, he has to explore every single surface. They've got a really good sense of smell, so he's just sniffing out all the different smells, which down here in the lab, there's a lot of different
Yes,
fun
well, it's a new
smells.
environment for him, so.
Yes, but typically when he's behaving himself, I've taught him to basically give me his paws. I roll the ink on his paws, and then we have a paw down behavior where he basically goes and puts his paws down on the paper like this.
Which is very similar
And
to
then
how we
comes back.
got the kangaroo prints. We did it the exact same way, where they just have trained to just put their paw print down. But you can verify that wallabies do not have friction skin. They do have a print pattern.
They
It's
have
a
a print.
textured surface, but it is not a unique fingerprint pattern. It's very much like our kangaroo, right,
Yeah.
where they do have a textured surface, but no unique fingerprints.
Which makes sense because kangaroos and wallabies are in the same created kind.
Exactly, and they're land dwellers.
And they're land
so,
dwellers.
exactly. Oh, here he comes.
Oh, coming
Let's
back.
see.
Hey, you want a peanut? Boomer.
Now you'll notice she's trying to encourage him to do this behavior that we want him to do, but not forcing
Yes.
him to do it.
Yes, we
want
don't
to treat
force
him
them.
humanely.
Yes, we don't force them to do anything. He doesn't really want to do. He's leaving fingerprints all over the floor.
over the floor.
Oh boy.
We'll get that cleaned up later. That's not a concern. Well, it doesn't appear he's going to cooperate.
I don't
for
think
the
so.
Detailed analysis.
I think
today.
he's gotten bored with the peanuts. He's like, there's so many other things in here to smell. But yes, typically when he's in his exhibit, he focuses really well. You also notice he's wearing a harness, so he's also harness trained and crate trained. So he's one of our probably most trained animals here. He knows quite a few different behaviors.
And you did do a live program not too long ago, looking at wallabies, and so our people watching can go back and learn more about them with that.
Yes.
And all right, it looks like he's not going to cooperate.
Yes,
for a
I don't
good
think he's
print
going to
today.
cooperate today.
We got a partial on the floor. We got a partial on the floor, but he's checking out the gimbal. All right, so as we think about the way God has created us, unique designs that he's given to humans, but then giving similar types of traits to animals where they might need those for functions that they're doing in the world around them. We can see there's a wonderful variety. And you've written a book that I'd like to encourage everybody to consider getting. This is great for a family book, kids book. It's called The Work of Your Hand, and it talks about that. So what was your inspiration behind writing this book?
Well, actually, I've been looking at fingerprints since I was a little girl. My father was an expert himself and started to teach me how to identify patterns at a very young age. Every time I had a science project, it was usually something to do with forensic science. And so there is no book out there that teaches kids at a very young age how to begin to classify fingerprint patterns.
Sure.
So I wrote this book so that kids can start to do that. So it is for younger elementary age children. It will teach them the 3 types of fingerprint patterns and what makes you unique, because here's what's important to realize. If there are billions of fingerprints, literally,
Yes.
and there's only 3 types, well, what makes your loop different from mine? We both have one, but why is mine uniquely different?
Yeah.
And that goes down to the individual characteristics that make up your fingerprint.
And we're going to be talking more about that next week. We're going to look more at human fingerprints and some of the unique characteristics there, when they form, how those structures come
And
about.
how you can process some of those at home,
Yes.
right? And have a lot of fun.
Yep, so being able
Looking
to
for fingerprint
identify
patterns.
those. Maybe you can set up your own crime scene mystery
Exactly.
and see who left their fingerprints behind. Well, we thank you for joining us again. We want to remind you that we've got more programs coming to you today and throughout the week, and then even in through Easter weekend. You can find out more about those, exactly what the topics are. We'll have our noon and 3 and 7 o'clock shows each day this week. And we hope you will come back and join us again. And in the meantime, go out and explore God's amazing creation.